Welcome back to the Dr. Bob Martin Show, everyone. Dr. Adam Brockman here. And today we're going to do something a little different. Now, I want to talk about a graph that I've been staring at for the last 48 hours. And honestly, I have some questions. So if you look at the obesity curves of the last 60 years, Japan is essentially a flat line. They're industrialized. They have convenience foods, convenient markets, ultra processed foods, and they have a high stress corporate culture. And yet their obesity rate barely moves. And meanwhile, here in America, we went from about 13% in 1960, as far as the obesity rate goes, to over 40% today. And get this, we did it while building a multi-billion-dollar so-called wellness industry. And also, follow into that is your health foods, your supplements. Basically, we are spending more to get sicker. So I want to bring back a man who has helped us look upstream at structural forces that are doing this to us. So joining me today again is Dr. David Heitman. And Dr. David, he's my go-to for wellness tech, information that's coming out, and he's become a regular on the show with his health insights. So he's a longtime friend of mine and a colleague of mine. So I want to welcome Dr. David Heitman back to the Dr. Bob Martin Show. How are you today, Dr. David?
Amazing. Thank you. It can be more excited to talk about this.
Yeah, so Dr. David, so you made this graph so people could see this in plain sight. So let's start with this Japan anomaly. They have all the trappings of modern life, like I mentioned, the stress, the long hours, and also the technology, but their obesity curve doesn't follow ours. So what do you
Yeah.
think is that single biggest variable that basically we're getting lost here in America?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, we're on a spending rocket ship here in America, and Japan has flatlined both their spending and their obesity. Like, they don't spend hardly any money on supplements or weight loss programs. And so to me, like, it just clicked in my head after watching a YouTube video. I was like, I need to really like chart this out for my own brain. And what ended up happening was a whole cultural thought process that I would have never really fully expected. It's been hinted at in my whole career of treating patients. But Japan has this aspect where it's grandmother wisdom. And we went the other way. We went to corporate agriculture wisdom. And there was a very clear split in the 70s, which in 80s, which I want to talk about. But I think for the most part, America has this obsession with transaction. Food is fuel. They've got, everything is about optimization and macros. In Japan is all about like sitting around together and truly that grandmother wisdom when it comes to their food. And so there's some really key differences in their culture that really are the foundation of what they do differently than what America does.
Yeah, and I find this fascinating. We keep trying to solve this problem, and we blame it on individual willpower, but Japan proves that when the environment is designed for health, the individual doesn't have to fight so hard for it. So here we are. It's like swimming upstream in this monsoon, and here they have this very calm pond, if you will. So we're seeing this massive divergence that which you mentioned starting let's say right around 1980. Do you think, Dr. David, was this a sudden shift in human biology, or did something in our agriculture, in our economy, the policies there essentially marinate the American public into this metabolic trap?
Well, I can guarantee we didn't suddenly genetically change from a biological organism standpoint. It was 100% a policy change because, right, if it was a biological change, the Japanese would have changed as well. And so 1977 for me was the defining year. We changed our food pyramid and a series of reasonable decisions got made by reasonable people. Farmers wanted to sell more corn. Politicians wanted cheaper food so that more people were not starving. Scientists wanted longer shelf life. And so what ended up happening in 1977 is the Agricultural Board started lobbying for a food pyramid that was significantly different. And we demonized fat. We subsidized corn. We included high fructose corn syrup and preservatives into everything with the correct intent of trying to do all of those objectives. No one was malicious in that thought process. And it was an experiment on the American public that we didn't know we were doing, which was the unfortunate thing that as an experiment, you should have a controlled end, and we didn't. We're still on this rocket ship just going.
Mhm. And exactly. And so here we are. You can't tell me 300 million people just lost the discipline right at that same exact moment in history. So what you're saying is we've changed the fuel source of the nation. We're talking about the high fructose corn syrup. We got the subsidies for processed grains, and then we wonder why our engine, our internal clock is starting to to tick a little bit harder. So here's the topic that we need to discuss. In America's wellness industry grew at that exact same rate as the obesity epidemic. So do you think our health system has become economically dependent on our continued metabolic dysfunction?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big trap that we don't even know we're in. And the economy needs us to not lose weight. The economy needs us to keep on the same path because otherwise all of those industries would collapse. And so we built a system around the problem, not the solution. Japan has built their system around the solution rather than the problem. And that little difference there is everything from a policy all the way down to how we think about food, how we move about our day, and what we think the solutions actually need to be versus what Japan thinks is they actually don't really even think about it. They don't have to think about it.
Yeah, and that's just it's part of their daily life. So I want you to explain the graph just a little bit more detail, so maybe for the listeners they can actually visualize what exactly is taking place.
Yeah, pre 1980 is essentially our obesity rate and our spending on health and wellness products. That's including weight loss programs, supplements, all of those sorts of categories, was almost the same as Japan. And then suddenly in 1980, there's this huge inflection point up. And since then, we raised up to about 80 billion in spending on supplements and weight loss programs. And Japan is still sitting around the same flat line of 1 billion to 5 billion that they've always spent on their food and health and nutrition. And so you see this chart, and it's actually almost hard to look at the chart simply because America is so far out of the norm compared to everyone else that you have to like really zoom out on this chart, and the lines for Japan almost just melt together and go to the bottom of the graph where you can barely see them. And then there's America with these big blue lines just going up and to the right, almost like a economic chart that you want to see. But in this case, we don't want to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for folks at home that are listening, you want to check out this the chart. I encourage you. We're going to post it on our website, which is at drbob.com. That's spelling out the word doctor, DOCTOR, bob.com. There you can see Dr. David Heitman's his graph that he made talking about our obesity epidemic and comparing it to Japan's, which has essentially had the same curve for years, where ours continues to spike, where we went from what I mentioned earlier, the rate of obesity was somewhere around 13% in 1960, and we're floating well over 40% now, and that continues to climb. So this is something that we need to address.
40% and 6 out of 10 people have a chronic disease now, whereas
Yeah,
before,
absolutely.
I mean, it all wraps together of, healthcare spending didn't make the chart just simply because I was trying to keep it real simple, but man,
Mhm.
that has escalated way
Mhm.
past that.
Yeah, and that's the next chart that I think we need to
Yeah.
focus on, right, Dr. David? Okay, today we're talking with Dr. David Heitman about the American obesity epidemic, and he came up with this great graph to show exactly how we keep on climbing, and yet, as comparison, Japan, with all the modern conveniences, stay about the same rate as they've been for the last 40 plus years. So this is ultimate irony. So we're talking about which is 800 8822. Again, that's 800-606-8822. That's where you'll find Dr. Bob and I, two licensed physicians, and we're standing by to help you unlock your best self. Okay, today we're talking with Dr. David Heitman about the American obesity epidemic, and he came up with this great graph to show exactly how we keep on climbing, and yet, as comparison, Japan, with all the modern conveniences, stay about the same rate as they've been for the last 40 plus years. So this is ultimate irony. So we're talking about that we have more access to health and so-called health care, but we're still sold on this fix by the same corporate structures that profit from, say, everything from the flu to these metabolic disorders, which ultimately cause a great deal of this obesity. So we need to actually sell or solve true metabolic health. And so, Dr. David, in Japan, movement is it's a byproduct of living. It's built into a walk to the train station or the commute, or to their local supermarket. In the US, movement is basically, it's a chore that we schedule at the gym. So I want you to let our listeners know, how does this structural difference in movement change that long-term metabolic set point for most people?
Yeah, this is really cool, where thankfully the research has actually shown this time and time again for the past 30 years. 45 minutes in the gym does not replace the 24 hours of living, right? And there's a really cool concept called the NEAT program, and it's groundbreaking research from Mayo, and it really shows all about how just regular movement through the day burns more calories, is better for your metabolism, better overall for your health, by just fidgeting and moving and chewing gum and taking the stairs, and all of these little things that add up that Americans stopped doing, just period. Japanese culture has, mobility things everywhere. You can see little bars that people are rubbing themselves up against for self-massage, and all sorts of cool cultural things that have lasted through the industrialization. And so this is where they don't think about exercise like Americans do and label it as exercise. They just culturally move a little bit more. They sit down into deeper squatting positions. Their beds are low off the ground, so they have to get that hip hinge going. And as a result of all of that, they just feel better. They have more energy.
Yeah, and I think here we've made movement an extracurricular activity rather than a requirement for life. And when you have to buy a membership just to use your legs, that system's already broken. We can walk to our mailbox, we can do these type of things. And your body, it was designed to be in motion, and not a sedentary computer operator that visits this the sweat box, the gym, for 30 minutes a day.
Yep.
But I want to talk
it's real quick.
Go ahead.
There was a fascinating other finding that I found when I was digging into this, is that elevator companies can't make it in Japan because no one wants to take the elevator there. And so it just random, culturally they're that different.
That yeah. I mean, most of us in America, the elevator is the first thing we look for when we go into a building that's more than 2 stories high, right?
Yep.
So that is pretty interesting. I find that very interesting. So let's talk about the food itself. We talk often about the show about these hyper palatable engineered foods. And I want to talk just briefly, how much of this is that lack of willpower, and how much of it is just our food system has been scientifically hacked, so to speak, to bypass these natural hunger signals that our body has, and we just want to keep eating and eating.
Yeah, the good news is that it's not our problem. It's the science problem. And they've really figured out how to hack our biology. Our willpower is actually pretty strong, but at 10 o'clock at night, the $50 billion industry of food science has really won in the hyperpalatability. And I love this word as a difference between ultra processed versus hyperpalatability, because what the science is showing is that we can eat up to 3 times as much food before our body even recognizes that we're eating the food. And that's where the science actually, like, they're doing their job of making something taste so good that we don't even have the feedback system and the biology to recognize that we're eating that food. It just tastes so good.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's you always heard the joke kind of, oh, eating a whole sleeve of Oreos. Well, that's not just something that we're like, oh yeah, that's we're just that hungry. No, absolutely not. It's just because we don't have that switch to turn it off after we eat two or three or whatever it is. And I'm not saying to avoid Oreos altogether. If you can, that's great, but it's also one of those things that folks need to hear. You're not failing your diet necessarily. Your diet is designed to fail you. When these food scientists, they're paid to find that bliss point that overrides your brain's "I'm full" signal. That's not a snack. That becomes, if you will, Dr. David, a bioweapon, right?
It is,
I mean, it's
yes.
just
It's
it's
infiltrated
pretty
in
wild.
the science is so narrow that they know when you want a chip that 4 to 7 crunches is exactly what your brain needs for maximal neurotransmitter processing of you wanting more, right? Because if it's more than that, then you feel like you're chewing on cardboard. If it's less than that, you're not satisfied. And so they have all of these metrics measured out, deep studies to prove to overcome your biology. And whereas Japan has a culture that is exact opposite, where they eat slowly, they eat together, they have rituals behind things. They don't even think about overeating simply because they take their time, and it allows that biology to catch up with. You don't have to feel bad about eating a few Oreos because they're only going to eat 1 or 2 of them, simply because the everything that ate before the Oreos told their biology that they were full. And so they get satisfied with the 2 Oreos rather than eating the whole sleeve.
Yeah, and this is something that we need to take a short break. But when we come back, I want to talk about how Japan, it's taught to them at a very early age about just food literacy. And it's an important conversation to have because it's something that is completely ignored here in the United States. If we're looking at Japan's school lunch system, I find it kind of legendary. They teach this food literacy and portion control from an early age, as early as 5. So I want to talk about how much of this obesity curve in this graph is being baked in during childhood via sometimes our current school lunch programs.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a great story on this one. That when my kids were younger, before we actually started homeschooling, we went and we got the privilege to go to the lunchroom with our kids. And as I was walking down the food line, they definitely had a pride in themselves of that they were the advanced food of Wisconsin for school lunch. And they literally had a tray of raw broccoli florets sitting there, some old apples, some pruny apples, and some black bananas is sitting in a tray next to the French fries, the tater tots, and the pizza, of course. So, did the kids choose that? Absolutely not. It was a very eye opening experience for me that these people were very proud of their lunch program and incorporating all of the healthy stuff, right? But in Japan, as a stark contrast, the kids are actually involved in the processing of the food for their school lunch. They actually are required to serve their peers. So it's actually the children themselves leading the charge in learning how to actually properly prep their food. They actually sit down with their teachers. It's a community there where is stark difference of, industrialized food and big trays here in America, where the kids have no idea where it comes from. It's just some sort of magical pan that sits in front of them, and there's no opportunity for them to get involved and even see where their food comes. They just can massively shovel it onto their plate, kind of thing.
Mhm. Yeah. We're feeding our children the very things that guarantee that lifetime of chronic illness, which again, we mentioned it was, 6 out of 10, 60% of Americans deal with some type of a chronic illness or disease. And so we're doing this in the name of convenience and also cost cutting. So we're sitting here, we're mortgaging our children's health for a cheaper bottom line, and that starts obviously in the school cafeteria. But beyond the calories, what about this invisible stuff? What roles do you see that the endocrine disruptors and the environmental toxins play in this divergence? Is our environment being programmed for our cells to just store fat?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. Our environment programs ourselves. You said it perfectly. Where uh, the other thing that we can't measure is the chemical effect of things. It's easy to measure steps, it's easy to measure calories. We change those things, and we try to improve outcomes. But if there's a BPA and it is an estrogen disruptor, and 30 years after that child is fed from a plastic bottle formula, that's really hard to measure. And so all of these ingredients that have been going into our food system for 40 years, we're just now starting to think, oh, maybe that there's something wrong with them. And so it's one of the least talked about things in nutrition. What kind of farming residue do we have on our ingredients? Is the glyphosate sticking to things? Is there plastics that are integrating in when you microwave that thing? Is it soaking in all of those chemicals into your food? And the answer is yes. We just don't know fully what the effects are. We just know it is affecting us clearly because that's what the graph shows.
And this is that invisible hand of the epidemic that we're talking about. If your hormones are being hijacked by the chemicals in your water, the plastic, the microplastics, and also in your foods, you can't count calories, and just look at it like you're blue in the face, and your body's still holding on to that weight. It's the signaling error as well. And so we're talking about calories and these disruptors that are out there. Dr. Dave, we just got about a minute or so before break, but if the American environment is rigged against us, how can we individually reclaim our health? What do you think are some structural changes a person can make today to mimic that Japanese metabolic resilience that they have?
Well, if we're just talking the school lunch thing, make lunch for your kids. Take the time to get them involved in the process. Start early, start them young, start to teach them how to wield a knife and cut their food and get them going. So it's as simple as that.
That's a good place to start. So Dr. David, I want you to explain one last time so everybody listening can visualize this graph. What exactly the best way to move forward with this information that you've created, and what exactly is that information?
Yeah, so the information is really simple. It started with this lifelong career in health and wellness and working on patients, but that realization of, wow, we buy a lot in America, and we buy a lot of weight loss stuff, and we buy a lot of supplements, and we buy a lot of stuff to try to get healthy. And when I looked at Japan, and their obesity rate was basically flat, their spending was basically flat, almost non-existent. And then you look at America starting in 1980, so rocket ship going up, and suddenly we're spending $80 billion dollars, and probably even more than that if you start counting in healthcare. And our obesity went all the way up to 41, 42%, and our chronic diseases are now 6 out of 10 people. What the heck happened? And it just makes you sit there and realize in almost a dumbfounded way, because we know Japan has McDonald's, Japan has vending machines everywhere. They even have a term where they like to work themselves to death. And so they have the high stress environment that America has, and what the heck is going on? And it really just comes down to, when I was doing the research on this, it is a fundamental cultural difference of the way that they approach their life. They use all sorts of terms. If you look back in their history, ikigai, which is not about being your workforce, it's actually about finding peace in the things that you're doing. They believe in craftsmanship. They believe in slow processes. They believe in community. The Okinawans believe that you should only get to 80% full. There's all these things that they do differently than American culture does. And when you start to dive into that, it's really easy to see as Americans what we can start to do, and that there's actually a lot of hope that we don't have to, give into this. We can start making immediate changes.
I agree with you. And again, thanks so much for joining me again, Dr. David Heitman. And I hope you join us again soon because maybe you can make a new graph for us to discuss. Uh, but folks, here's the takeaway. Your body, you've heard me say it. Your body is a biological masterpiece. It was designed for vitality. It was designed for energy. It was designed ultimately for resilience. So if you're struggling with your weight or your health, start looking at the environment that you're swimming in. And that divergence between the US and Japan shows us that health isn't just about personal choices, it's about structural ones as well. But until our policies catch up to the science, the responsibility falls on us to build our own environments, our own microenvironments, if you will. So we need to walk more. We need to eat real food. We need to avoid the hacked, meaning ultra processed products. And most importantly, we need to stop always listening to an industry that needs you to stay sick to keep their margins up. You do have the ability to be your own best doctor most of the time. It's time that to give it that physician, that ability, the right tools to do the job. I'm Dr. Adam Brockman. I want you to take charge of your health because that's your birthright. We'll see you next hour on Health Talk America presents the Dr. Bob Martin Show.